All right, welcome everybody to episode 2 of the Total Relationship Podcast. I'm Kim Cochenour, one of your co-hosts here today with Tyson Ray. Tyson, how are you feeling today?
I am here. We're trying something different that you have some outline and I'm winging it like scriptless. Here we go.
Yep, you're going to be your best self with that
I'm
because
going to
I'm
be
going to
my
tee you
best
up
self,
well.
off the cuff. You're just going to get it raw.
Yep. Well, and I think you do a really good job with that because you're really passionate about this topic. Hence why we're doing this podcast together, why we got the book written. We're just going to dive right in.
And
The
you
one
and
thing
you bring and you bring the structure, right? Because
I
otherwise
do.
I could just talk for a couple hours. It turns out people would rather hear this in segments. So
Yes, yeah. We're giving everybody
if you're
bite-sized
listening to
pieces.
this, you're welcome to Kiss Kim's here.
Thank you, sir. So, everybody who's listening to this podcast, if they're interested in the financial services, they've got a relationship with an advisor. Tyson, one thing I've heard you talk a lot about is the heart of the advisor is always to help someone. So, talk to me about kind of why you think it's important that advisors have that heart of helping others before we really dig in today, because it's going to set the stage.
Well, I believe the heart of every advisor is to help people. Um, I believe it's a journey for the advisor to get there. Like in any relationship, uh, I think too many advisors have gotten too much information in their head about what they're supposed to be as an advisor, and
Mhm.
it's about portfolios or money, or that therein lies something of their value add. And early in my career, I had written on a piece of paper. It's like it's not as ironic as it was at the time, it still doesn't come out. It just seems awkward to say it's not about money. You're a
No.
financial advisor in the financial services industry, and in your head you think it's all about money, and in the end, it's really not. Um, it's about realizing the difference that you can make in advising people on how to live their best life that they can afford and not run out or not regret it.
Hmm.
Um, and it once freed of the burden of thinking it's about making more money or about more money, and making money may need to be part of that relationship, or a client may need to build more wealth, but realizing it there's a whole nother level to advising clients that is relational, just like getting into a relationship with someone is relational and advising, right? I mean, you get into
Hmm.
a marriage or relationships is to be complements to one another and to advise one another, make better decisions together, do life together. And ultimately an advisor is just another type of relationship.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, the reason why you wrote the Total Relationship book and the why we think this podcast is so important is you're really trying to help present a solution, the compelling alternative aimed to the problem of this industry because clients' lives are at stake and each person you meet, each person the audience meets is worthy of being saved from the product-focused industry. And why I think this is really important that we dive in at the very beginning of this podcast series is so you can actually remind advisors that they're here for the people and not for the products.
And to remind the client that may be listening to this,
Mhm.
if all your advisor does is talk about the product, there's other advisors out there that might be a better fit.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and performance and products are how advisors are trained and taught and incentivized. And so, one time I was talking to you and we were at a conference together and I saw people hopping on these big buses. And I was like, where are they going? And you're like, well, that is that such and such company taking 100 people out to dinner. And that is such and such company taking 50 people out to dinner. And they just took them out for golf. And he's like, tell me you're not dissuaded by that pamphlet sitting on your desk that next morning after you went and had dinner paid for by that other company. And I was like, oh,
Yeah. Or I love it when I go to these conferences and, you know, booth after booth after booth after booth is put out of product and why you should sell their product. And then what I've always just found, um, just it's almost, I just laugh at it. It is just funny to watch adults, and in some cases, adults with means, right? I mean, successful advisors that make quite a bit of personal wealth themselves go around and pick up these tchotchkes of these little like they
A
fill these
USB
bags.
drive.
Oh my God, like glow in the dark ice or cubes that you freeze, and then you get to have your cocktail glows, or pens or pencils, or just screensavers, or your little
Mouse
mouse
pads.
pads, not screensavers, little things to clean glass. It's just like all this free stuff.
Hmm.
And the reason these booths put those out there is because they're implanting their brand into this advisor's bag, and then onto their desk, or they take them home. And the reverse psychology of that, or your subconscious of that, is all of a sudden when you're conflicted to sell something to a client, is it because you just got the most recent little trinkety gift, right? It's just like that. And what's crazy is none of these firms get to invest in a different market. The market globally is these companies you get to invest in.
Hmm.
It's the same for everybody.
Yeah.
And when all of a sudden you realize, wait, if everything is the same, is that really where you're going to add your value?
Hmm.
And the reason we wrote the book is, in the world we're in, the government is continually trying to legislate, and they should, uh, putting a client's best interest first,
Hmm.
and creating legislation and rules around that, and checklists and things to try and document that you've done that. And what the total relationship is for the advisor is really the how-to guide to put a client's best interest first. And for the client that could read this, it is to what to expect from an advisor if they're going to put your relationship first.
Yeah. And clients and advisors need to understand that it's worthy of the work to invest in that kind of relationship with your advisor. There is nothing more personal than someone's finances. Often we are more comfortable disclosing things about our medical experience to someone at a cocktail table or cocktail hour instead of actually talking openly about our finances. And so it's an opportunity to present a unique relationship that shouldn't be that unique between an advisor and a client. So I think it's important that you kind of talk about why is that so important that you actually develop the relationship with a client instead of focusing on just the production and the comparison charts of what we did last year. Why do we have to have that relationship with our clients?
I think it's learning from mistakes that I made, that I didn't know I was making,
Mm,
and then learning from other advisors that have also made mistakes. And then I love asking clients, like, what was their best and worst experience with investing themselves, whether an advisor or not, with an advisor or with not an advisor.
mhm,
Um, and the one I can think of that was kind of like the first, like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe it, they're going to do this to themselves, was a young couple that came to me, and here they were so excited that they basically had saved up this $100,000 that they wanted to invest and grow and set it aside for later. And it was kind of like this status symbol of invest, like they've graduated, they've become
mhm.
like adults, right? And so we put this money in an investment, and it was, check all, ask the risk questionnaire and get the time frame, and it's for long term, and so on and so forth. And about 2 years later, I get a phone call, and they need $60,000 of the $100,000 investment because they bought a car. They weren't thinking about buying the car. They didn't tell me that part. They bought the car.
Oh,
Now
they
they need
already
the money.
owned it?
Yeah, no, they went to like, it was
No, but
Monday.
they
They
were
bought it
there.
Sunday. Right.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden it's like, hey, liquidate our long-term investment and send us this money.
Mm,
And the problem was the markets were down. So now the
yeah.
$100,000, which I got paid on to sell them
Mhm,
early in my career, is now less than where they started. And now they want to liquidate the majority of it. And it's just
mm,
like, I, and what I realized was because I came and listened to what they said and effectively appeased what they wanted. They wanted to
mhm.
make this long-term investment. Well, here's a long-term investment, and here's the questionnaire. And I did all the check the boxes and do due diligence that an advisor is regulated to do from the
Yeah.
firms they're in or the industry they're in. But because I didn't bother to build the relationship to understand the person sitting in front of me,
Yeah.
I didn't ask the question about questions we ask now about
Mhm.
what about home improvements, or when's, usually by the time they're probably in their 30s, and they usually learn it from their parents, people have what I would say a rhythm of how they buy cars, right?
Mhm.
It's either they drive it for so many years, they drive it for so many miles, or they drive it till it's dead. And what I didn't know to ask back then was kind of the checklist of all the questions that, when I care about the person, I'm trying to identify all the reasons we shouldn't have made that long-term investment because they
Mhm.
had tunnel vision. And
Yeah.
when we sat down and went, it didn't go through any of that like we do now. Had I taken them through the process that the total relationship talks about, I would have identified that every 3 years they buy a car, and in 2 years you're buying a car, and where's that coming from? And if you're wanting to pay cash, which is what you've done in the past, then you can't invest this whole $100,000 because you don't have you have a need that's in the short term, and you're telling me you're going to put all this for the long term.
Yeah.
And it is just um, it was it just hurt, right? It's like you couldn't fix it. You couldn't do anything about it. It's just like they need the money. They bought the car. You can't plan. So now you're at the mercy of where the markets were at. And I harmed them. And I didn't
Yeah.
mean, I felt like I harmed them. And it's just, I've learned, and why the total relationship has been written is like, here's all the lessons of what we've learned to try and prevent clients from making investment decisions with dollars that they have tunnel vision and not seeing the bigger picture, that taking them through a process to build a total relationship with them, which is not just the relationship with the advisor, but their relationship with their family, their relationship with their house and their car and their life and what they need money for, and the relationship with risk and return and so on and so forth, allows an advisor to be a much better advisor. Because most of the time, I think advisors should be preventing clients from making some of these investments or
Yeah.
putting too much in one thing. When they don't know any better, they filled out the checklist as long term, and then they find out later on that they actually hurt people because they didn't start with a different approach that we try and talk about in total relationship.
Yeah. And just for the listeners, we're actually going to dig into handfuls of the questions that we actually ask our clients as part of our onboarding process. So they'll stay tuned to future episodes and make sure you're subscribed so you can actually get those notifications when those go live.
Leave it to me to get ahead of myself, right?
No, you're
That's
teasing
a
it. You're
teaser.
just fine. Well,
Yes.
but you hit on something really important, Tyson, because if there's the solo advisor out there who's got the junior advisor, or there's larger firms building a legacy practice, this is applicable to everybody, because what you're really developing in the total relationship is lasting relationships with your clients, your team, and their family members. They see the difference in how the advisor client relationship is, and there's something more there than just a transaction. It really kind of helps shift the focus of what a lot of people think about the industry, myself included. Before I started working here, I had no idea that an advisor relationship could be more collaborative. It could be more of like the heart of a teacher and really just understanding what somebody needs. And I think a lot of that has to do with the values of the firm. Every client is encouraged to find a firm that actually aligns with their values and the heart of what the firm wants to do. But it'll help you be more clear about who you want to be to your client.
Well, and the problem is everybody sounds the same, and I think everybody wants to have these values and put all this stuff out, but the hard wiring of the financial services industry is still there, which I was trained
Mm-hmm.
and told. I was trained and told my job, quote unquote, was to hunt and gather assets.
Mm-hmm.
Hunt and gather, like, find, kill, set aside, go find, kill again.
Yeah.
And you make more money the more assets you have. So then the game is almost set up at the detriment of the client,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if the best thing for the client is to pay off their mortgage for their own peace of mind, regardless of rates of return or what the better financial decision is, like, that's against a client's financial incentive. That harms the advisor when they pay off those mortgages.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite saying, and it's in the book, my favorite saying is no one's paid to tell you to do this. Like, I'm
That's
recommending
very
this to
true.
you, but it's actually at my expense. But I believe for the relationship we have, that's what's best for you.
Mm-hmm.
And helping clients find their answers that they have, and then remind them of the answers that they gave, because sometimes the best
They
thing for
forget.
someone is not the best financial thing. It's the
Yeah.
best thing for their quality of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
is just the privilege of what doing a total relationship and living out these values versus writing them on a wall and
Mm.
living in conflict of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think until you're exposed to an advisor or you hear something like this, you don't know what you're missing. And it's not to say that the advisors that are out there don't want this information, because again, I said in the first episode, I've been in meetings with you, I've been in conferences with you, I've heard you talk to other advisors about this, and a little light bulb goes on because you're right. They think that they're all doing this, but not to the level of the total relationship really takes it to. And honestly, every one of our clients that are here, they're not a one size fits all. Like everyone's got such a unique situation. And that's kind of what some of those questions dig into. And so it's important that we map things out for clients, right? I've seen you do that in meetings and kind of talk about what we're doing and how you can map that. But talk about how the relational side of mapping makes a difference when it comes to the total relationship, as opposed to just putting that $100,000 into the investments.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a conference I was at, and I was speaking to a group of advisors, and I slowly throughout the crowd kind of saw the heads start bobbling up and
Bobblehead
down.
sales, yeah.
Yeah, in agreement, right? And as I was leaving that conference and walking down the hall of the conference center that we were at, one of the advisors came up to me and kind of just stopped, and he was just like, "Is it really just that simple?" Is what he said.
Mm,
And I said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And what was complex was, here's what I'm going to sell you, and here's the prospectus, and here's the disclosures I have to go through, and here is the risk return and the reward, and why it comparison to something else, and why is it better than or worse than or whatever, and trying to educate someone on making a decision at a level that and going through stuff that they kind of just are like,
they
well,
don't understand. That's
well,
why they're
it's not
coming to
like, it's just
you.
like, yes, and and that's how he would start, right? How much do you have, and what is it for? And then here's the investment. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, like our first meeting is nothing but open-ended questions of them
Mhm.
helping prioritize the rest of their lives, and do they want to leave anything in the end? And it's a dialogue, and it there isn't objections to it. Like most people,
Yeah.
most people that come to us, no matter what they think they're going to get when they come through, they've been told, like, we're going to go through 2 or 3 meetings of a process to really get to know each other and understand your whole situation and what's going on and what really matters to you and what you're afraid of, and how we can help and what you're looking for in an advisor and what we do in a client. And when we finally get around to deciding what actually is going to be allocated to investments, it becomes a much easier conversation, because the
Mhm.
level of trust that's been built and the level of understanding at the level they can understand it, because it's their answers to these questions.
Yep.
Uh, like he said, he's like, is it really just that easy? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
uh, because people want to connect. People want, especially in this social media day and age, right? People want to feel heard, and
Mhm.
people want to have that relationship that builds the trust that lets the advisor do a much better job.
Yeah. Well, and clients and they love talking about their family and their kids, whether there's everyone's got pain in their family, but there's things that they can highlight and appreciate. They love talking about their hopes and dreams. And how often do people kind of get stuck in the rhythm of their day to day job, that when they're actually preparing for retirement or getting to a place where they need some help, do they actually get permission to dream and plan and actually think about what that is? Like, what a sacred privilege that is as an advisor to facilitate that kind of dialogue with somebody.
Well, in the process that we especially take couples through, I just laugh at, because people will, yes, they would like to talk about those things, or they're talking to themselves about those things in
Yeah,
their
but not
heads
between
throughout their
them.
lives, not necessarily between them.
Yep.
That when we take them through this process, we start finding out how aligned or unaligned the couple is with what it is they want to do with the time and the resources that they have. And again, not the mistake I think too many advisors make is they default to whoever is the stronger personality of the couple,
Mhm.
and not get the full picture
Oh,
of the
yeah.
two people sitting there, especially if you're going to end up with one of them that's not that decision maker, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, but it for the advisor that's listening to this, and you're tired of trying to control things you don't control, markets, rates of return, the future, guessing what the economy is going to do. The total relationship allows you to shift your focus on what you can control, which is who is this person sitting in front of me and how have they changed since the last time I met with them? Because one of the things that total relationship teaches is, at the very least on an annual basis, I want to reserve the right to pretend I don't know you and ask you again some of these questions to see if they change, because people change their mind. Life happens, and all of a sudden they have new information a year later they didn't have before, that all of a sudden they may reprioritize what they told you a year before. And I think too many advisors just skip over, and now they're reporting on what happened in the markets over the last year and what are they guessing the market's going to do in the next year and why they have assets where they have them, and yet not taking the time to sit across from this person and understand how have they evolved in the last year? How have they become wiser? What have they now started to worry about that they weren't worried about before? And laying that foundation and building that a relationship that just transcends just the portfolio
Mhm.
um, allows the advisor to just be a much better advisor and allows them to control what they can control. And I think it brings, I have this mindset of we're like a battery, right? Negative energy, positive energy. And if you're listening to this and every time you meet with your advisor, it just zaps the energy out of you because they're talking to you about stuff that you really don't want to hear or talk to them about. Or you're the advisor and you're just so sick of trying to do research to guess what's going to be the better than, or you're putting your value add on the performance of outbeating something or product that you've sold that doesn't make any sense now. That's sucking the energy out of you. This total relationship is just life-giving. I just get excited to be able to do it. And I've been so excited to be able to do it. Now it's to try and teach other people. It's like, hey, this is another way. This is, I think, a better way. It's a more positive way. And it's received both from
Mhm.
advisors and the clients in a better way.
Yeah. Well, and so that tees us up really well. So, our next episode, we're going to really dig into our discovery deck tool that we use here. It kind of gives the advisor an opportunity to kind of get a great understanding of who the clients are and how the advisor can step in and help. So, we'll dive into that next in our next episode. But if you want to head over to totalrelationship.com/discovery deck, we actually have a free PDF download for you there. So for those advisors who actually want to be a part of the solution and just not the trend of what the industry has been, you want to put in the work and actually develop these relationships to understand your clients at that true, deep, total relationship level. This is a work worth doing. So Tyson, what do you want to leave the listeners with today?
What I want to leave the listeners with today, whether again you're an advisor and we are going to we are putting this podcast out for you as a way to either enhance what is in the book or to start, you have to take information in multiple times for it to start applying and to figure out how does this thing become yours. It's not mine or
Mhm.
my way. These are, what are the ways you can enhance what you're doing that brings you energy and gives you a value add that's different than what you've been doing in the past. And for the client, it's to realize a different relationship that you might be able to have with an advisor who might be meeting needs that you didn't know you have. I mean, when we tend to meet with a client the first time, I start by saying, I'm applying for a job that you probably didn't even know you needed someone to help you with, because
Mhm.
it's not just about the portfolio. And this podcast is just another resource for people to go back to listen to and to be able to educate themselves on, and to create a community around how we can try and do this together, because I think it's worthy of that effort.
Yes, it is. So make sure that you're following along with us over on LinkedIn. We have a total relationship group there where we're gathering like minded advisors and clients who are interested in building that relationship and learning how to do this really well. You can follow Tyson and I over on LinkedIn, and all of those things will be linked in the show notes. You can find us there. And we just look forward to connecting with you. So make sure you subscribe to the episode so you know when episode 3 launches.